An excerpt from Daniel Muller's work, Shamanic Kabbalah, reads, "The spiritual experience of Binah is the vision of sorrow. Within this Sephirah, one is to have a vision of the holistic picture of all that is, all that was, why it was, what it is now, why it is, and what it is to become. In essence, true and total understanding of all existence. The Great Mother sees all. She sees our joys, but also our pains and our sins. And in all that she sees, she is indeed in sorrow. Therefore, managing the vision of sorrow is best achieved through Binah's primary virtue, silence. It is necessary to still the noise and the raging waters, to understand all things in their truest vision. By stilling the clamor, can the sparkling stars of the heavens accurately reflect on the mirroring surface of the body of water below." Binah, of course, is traditionally associated with Saturn in Kabbalah. Saturn's a huge subject to tackle. I've made about 1 million videos about it, and it's obviously the namesake of my channel. But there's so much nuance and depth to it. Saturn is responsible for this vision of sorrow experience. It's all that great Negretto dark night of the soul stuff. But in the wake of so much terror and devastation, when you relax into the vision of sorrow, when you learn to just lean back and be silent with no distractions, just patiently watching for what seems like forever, your field of view becomes larger and larger and higher, and you can see things more as God does. It's why I say all the time, Saturn initiates you into the sky view of Uranus. If you have the patience to sit and watch, and the wisdom and maturity to receive God's vision without judgment, so many questions are answered. I preface the video this way because there are many who are having the beginnings of spiritual awakening who haven't been edified or granted the holistic sky view by the vision of sorrow, and they've made many assumptions about the world from a place that's very reactionary and very emotional. I am willing to name names. The main people I have in mind are the YouTubers Tony Sayers and Benedictine the Truth. But there are many other YouTubers along the same lines who talk a lot about the Earth as a soul trap ruled by a class of malevolent beings who are employing organized and highly methodical means to extract energy via the induction of trauma in life forms, presumably mostly human ones. In this video, I'll be addressing the idea of the soul trap, the question of why karma isn't instantaneous, as well as sharing some of the higher understandings that have been gifted to me by following the vision of sorrow as to why things in the world must be the way they are, even when at first glance it seems horrifying or unnecessary from a designer standpoint. For starters, there's a lot wrong on its face about the idea that the world is a soul trap optimized for traumatic energy extraction. We can actually compare and contrast the idea with relationships of narcissistic abuse to see why the way the world is structured is not even really close to being optimized for energy extraction by way of trauma or negative emotion. In the process of trying to extract narcissistic supply, it's fully within a narcissist's interest to break their victim into a state of completely helpless codependency. In the process of narcissistic abuse, many narcissists are successful in using methodical gaslighting and classical conditioning to obliterate the victim's intuition and sense of right and wrong. The victim's entire sense of what's normal and abnormal, right and wrong, deserved or undeserved, can be proficiently and artfully ground down into nothing. This is a really important step for narcissists to get all the juice out of their squeeze of the victim, because they have a constant and perpetual sense that the victim can and will leave them. So narcissists need to keep shifting the goalpost more and more, making the victim more broken and delusional in order to ensure that they can keep juicing the emotions of the victim. And also breaking the victim doesn't just ensure the longevity of the source, it also allows for spicier and more audacious abuse, which can elicit even more extreme emotional reactions, which result in much greater narcissistic supply than if the victim wasn't as delusionally codependent and stuck in the relationship due to how broken they are. So if you want to be a really good trauma parasite, it's always within your interests to shift the goalpost, to break your hosts and victims more and more, and shatter their reality so you can get them to the point of absolute emotional hysterics. Benedictine the Truth suggests the malevolent parasite beings who are the architects of this world let things remain somewhat good so that no one catches on that energy extraction is taking place. Brother, your thinking is very delusional, but maybe not as delusional as the citizens of North Korea, which is as close as we can get in our modern world to what a narcissistic relationship looks like between a tyrannical political power and its citizenry. Not too many dissidents or upstarts in North Korea. No one's really speaking out internally. That's because tyranny is an amazing way to break a population, even into a state of delusional frenzy and hysterical worship and fear. And notice that it works. I mean, tyrannies fall out all the time. But if these Archon parasite beings architected the world for optimized trauma extraction, it's very easy to quickly set up another tyranny just as bad to take its place. Just watch or read Orwell's 1984. That's not delusional fiction. You could absolutely break a population down to that point through propaganda and coercion. In George Orwell's 1984, the 2 minutes hate is a daily ritual where party members in Oceania are forced to watch a film depicting Emmanuel Goldstein and the Brotherhood unleashing a torrent of hatred and violence. This ritual serves as a tool for social control, diverting citizens' anger and frustration towards an external enemy, preventing them from directing it at the party itself. This could absolutely be a real thing, and people could be broken further for it to get worse and worse and worse. This is, however, not how the world is, and it's outrageous and gross hyperbole to suggest that it is. The fact is that the world is not optimized for traumatic energy extraction, not even close. We can take it further. In extracting negative emotions, as we've already said, control and psychological brokenness are increasingly advantageous and desirable. The so-called memory loss between lifetimes is obviously advantageous, as you understand it, towards not making enough progress to rise above the prison-like extraction center that is Earth. But the thinking here is still delusional and not realistic, because optimized extraction would only be aided by allowing only the broken and codependent psychological contents to remain in remembrance across lifetimes, rather than wiping all memory entirely. We could just keep the psychological contents that are broken and codependent rather than wiping all of your memory. That would be better. That would be more advantageous. The malevolent architects could create a positive feedback loop of increasing delusion and increasing codependency and brokenness by simply playing with what gets remembered across lifetimes. As it's clear that in your proposed scheme, Benedictine the Truth, they clearly have the ability to wipe your memory. The closer you examine this whole soul trap energy harvesting idea, the more it falls apart and the more ridiculous it becomes. And I can tell you're taking the problem of evil a lot worse than all the philosophers that came before you. So hopefully I can shed some light on this. The biggest error I see that almost everyone keeps making continuously is the failure to see existence as cyclical. Instead, they make the error of looking at the present moment, or at best a sample size of a couple thousand years, to extrapolate that to be representative of the entire scope of the human condition. If people actually studied astrology with any depth, rather than thinking it's nothing but newspaper star sign horoscopes, they'd quickly realize that it's A, 100% true and verifiable, and B, made up of a series of perfectly balanced oppositions. There's malefic planets, which bring woe, strife, and loss, and there's benefics, which bring restoration, gain, and pleasant outcomes. For every Mars, there's a Venus, and for every Saturn, there's a Jupiter, and every planet gets equal airtime. Just because things suck now doesn't mean that's representative of how all life on Earth is. Everything is made up of cycles. Cycles inside of cycles inside of cycles. You could even make the mistake of measuring how good things are in the world at the moment of an ideal astrological configuration, because that could be just one cycle in the scheme of a bigger cycle. For example, maybe you've got Venus conjunct Jupiter in Pisces, and the moon is sextiling them from Taurus, or trining them from Cancer. Wow, that's all kinds of dignities. We got Venus in its exaltation in Pisces, Jupiter in its domicile in Pisces, the moon in Taurus in its exaltation, or the moon in Cancer in its domicile. Happy, happy, joy, joy. What a glorious day. Clearly, it doesn't get better than this. And if this isn't that satisfying to me, then that means life must not actually be that good. Okay. Or maybe you haven't considered that that cycle is part of a larger cycle through which it's filtered. You've got astrological ages. You've got the yugas. All these things can be separated by thousands of years. If you're in the Kali Yuga, of course things suck. Your mistake is not even considering the possibility of the yugas and just observing the fact that everything sucks right now and extrapolating that to mean that that's how things have always been, and that it's a fundamental aspect of the world. The truth is, the world does suck, but for a far subtler and more insidious reason than just your immediate experience of it as unpleasant. There's a Kali Yuga where everyone is garbage and everything is backwards, upside down, pants on head, retarded. And then things get good again. I'm sorry, let me read it again. Everything sucks right now, blah, blah, blah. And that it's a fundamental aspect of the world. The truth is the world does suck, but for a far subtler and more insidious reason than just your immediate experience of it as unpleasant. There's a Kali Yuga where everyone is garbage, everything is backwards, upside down, pants on head, retarded, and everywhere you look is evil. But there's also a Satya Yuga where everything is all candy and rainbows, and everyone has sublime spiritual connection, peace, and truth. Things get bad, and then things get good again. The experience of the world will be pleasant and enjoyable, and then it will be negative and bad like it is now. This waxing and waning of high and low, and good and bad continues regardless of how spiritual or worldly people are. But the insidious and subtle effect of the world is this, that by deepening your worldliness in the face of the highs and lows the world has to offer through its various ages, happiness degrades into low pleasure that's skin deep. It's an externalization and outwardness which outsources enjoyable experiences to outside of yourself and at a surface level. And therefore deep attachment is born. And so good times will come, but the more worldly you become, the less you'll be able to properly enjoy those good times. It becomes pathological, like addiction, and more like orgasm than true contentment. And in the bad times, the shadow of your deep external attachment rears its ugly head. Everything that filled you up is taken away from you, and you're filled with deep despair and emptiness. To be a worldly person and outwardly focused one in the face of these cycles of positive and negative is to be dulled, to be numbed, desensitized. The experience is so damaging that it leaves the world... I'm sorry, my screen turned off. The experience is so damaging that it leaves the worldly person broken into pieces. and the psyche is fragmented, and the unpleasant reality is repressed. The conscious mind jumps in joy when the good things are happening. But due to this compulsive outwardness, when the bad things happen, the conscious mind can't move inward to face it. And therefore, the unexamined shadow is born. A storehouse for all the vile aspects of the world and the self the individual in their outwardness refuses to face. In the worldly person's outwardness, they lose touch with their own individual thoughts and beliefs and become a mimic of what everyone else thinks, falsely mistaking popular consensus and culture for peace and truth. This becomes another positive feedback loop where everyone else's ignorance and dysfunction is ate up and assimilated by everyone else through the adherence to groupthink. The more they rely on what's outside and don't face what's inside, the more broken they become, and the more unconscious they become, and the more pain they're in, and the less they exist as their authentic self, and more they exist as a persona they've created to be a part of the group, and the more they live in the flesh, and the more of an addict they become. You see, the more outward you go, the more everything becomes false, like a lie. Matter in the flesh is the devil's work. And in the Christian view, everything the devil makes is a fabricated counterfeit and false copy of the true divinity. People can't continue on this path of outwardness long until the numbing and addictive properties of the world turn them into the earth's image. They continue to be broken and traumatized by the world, but their solution is always to avoid that trauma and seek more of the world to cope with it. And so the next solution is obvious: to let go of the inner complexity and simplify, and to see even less of the inner world and more of the carnal, low vibrational, higher density outer one. And so what they really want, by definition, is to become an animal. And so they do. They become duller and more simpler forms of life as part of a pattern of addiction to the outwardness of the flesh and the world. But crucial to understand is that all throughout this entire process, the cycle of the heavens hasn't changed one bit. It was the same highs and the same lows, the positive and negative, the same Sun and Saturn, increase and decrease. It was the orientation to the cycles of positive and negative that changed. What people do in response to the cycles and where they put their attention. And this brings us to some scripture. Starting with Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7. I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. Or we have Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 2. The same fate comes to all, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who sacrifice and those who do not. Or we have Matthew chapter 5, verse 45. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. It makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Everything in the world is this zodiac cycle, and the zodiac cycle is perfectly balanced with opposites of benefic and malefic. We're all subject to the same cycles, and so the sun will shine on all of us regardless of what we do. And Saturn's darkness and rain will come over us regardless of what we do. But what I think is underappreciated is that the cycle is not just a cycle, it's a spiral. When you choose a worldly orientation to these cycles, the circular motion of the cycle leads to a downward spiral, and you become more of the flesh and less of the spirit. And when you choose God and the spirit, it's an upward spiral, and you retain the clarity and peace of your consciousness. It's that transitional period between godliness and worldliness as a human being that leads to that great tension and suffering. Which is why the evolutionary pressure delivered by karma through the cycles of the heavens is relieved by either moving towards the world or moving towards the heavens. The relief of that pressure is a very big part of what creates the current of evolution or devolution. And it's the ultimatum energy of Pluto, all or nothing. You have to choose a side. You have to choose the world or God. Because if you don't have the evolutionary pressure, I'm sorry, let me read that again. You have to choose a side. You have to choose the world or God, because if you don't, the evolutionary pressure will just continue to increase to uncomfortable levels until you move in a particular direction. And so you never get to remain stagnant or lukewarm. Never. Book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 16. So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spit thee out of my mouth. There's more to the emotional and knee-jerk reactionary perspective of the soul trap people. So I'll address those points too. They say, no, but this entire process can't be divine. It's profoundly unfair. Terrible things happen to people, totally unfair and brutally painful things that have no lesson attached to them. You have deformities, harm to children, pointless wars. There's no meaning or lesson in any of that. How can you say that? In response, I say that this is again the subtle and insidious nature of worldliness. Viewers of my content will remember the point I make all the time when I say Pluto is related to absolute meaning in the core of spirit, and the earth is its opposite and relates to matter in the flesh, and matter is meaningless. This can be a tricky concept for some people, but once you understand it, it blows you away with how much it makes everything make sense. So the example I like to give to explain it is to ask the question, what's the meaningful part? The matter in the flesh that makes up the body, or the spirit that inhabits the body that gives the subjective experience of being inside of it? And of course the answer is, it's the spirit inhabiting the body that's the meaningful part. It's what allows for the conscious experience that we discern as being meaningful in the first place. The matter in flesh is just the clay that's molded to hold the consciousness. And so the conclusion is that matter itself, without any consciousness to experience it, is completely meaningless. It's just meaningless clay. So the flesh itself is meaningless, and the spirit is what's meaningful. But this isn't just a duality, this is a spectrum. The more you live in the outwardness of the flesh, the more meaningless things become. And the more inward to the core of spirit one moves, the more meaningful things become. This is reported in people's experience of non-dual light in the Barden tradition of meditation. Non-dual light is basically the highest meditation experience you can have, and it's correlated with essentially reaching the deepest level of God. And what people say when they have this non-dual light experience is that you can't really define anything that's going on there. It's just a light with no real discernible qualities. But you get the overwhelming sense that what's going on here is extremely important. So this is the crucial part to understand, is to add the Earth and Pluto as its own axis in relation to the cycles of positive and negative experience. And when you do that, what you begin to see is that positive things will happen and negative things will happen. But those things will take form in where you've been putting your attention. So yes, you get people born with deformities, and you get starvation, and you get all these things which just seem meaningless, because matter is meaningless. So if after so many lifetimes you've been living in the flesh, putting all your attention into the outwardness of the world, the meaningless nature of the earth and the flesh will be the location of the negativity. And this is the true aim of demons. And this is something that doesn't really get talked about enough. Our knee-jerk reaction is to assume that every negative thing that happens is just the devil. That can't be it, really. I mean, we already read the quote from Isaiah, I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. So I mean, very realistically, negativity is generally the result of spirits of Saturn and Mars. And they're not necessarily evil or demons. They're just negative. I say all the time that demons are related to the Earth, not necessarily malefic planets like Saturn or Mars. And I bring up all the time how people of the medieval period and Renaissance believed that demons made up their bodies of the unclean air of the earth, while they believed angels made up their bodies of the pure heavenly ether beyond the sphere of the moon, which is the air beyond the sphere of the moon. Demons, more than anything, are a terrestrial of the earth. So what doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that demons' primary goal isn't necessarily to create suffering. It's actually to create meaninglessness and low vibration and high density. I mean, I talk about all the time about how God is the logos, is the word, and in programming and software, only like 0.00001% of possible code inputs create a functional, meaningful software. Well, I mean, that means that 99.9% of all the other possibilities are just gibberish that has no meaning, and it would just lead to dysfunctional software. That's really where the essence of demons is contained. I mean, in this software we call reality, there is positive and negative, but it's all meaningful. The true nature of primordial darkness, which is the demonic nature, which the earth sets a limit as to how much can be absorbed from that. The earth is the housing place for these demons of primordial darkness. Their nature is gibberish. It's chaos. And so it leads to meaninglessness. It's the same meaninglessness as if you were trying to encode a software and your software code was, you know what I mean? So, yeah. So what doesn't get talked about enough, yep. So that's the first mistake, is seeing the devil in all forms of negativity. Even in making this mistake, though, people can see the face of the devil or demons clearly when they see the image of a force that wants to cause suffering, deception, loss, confusion, and abuse, as well as to cause carnality, physicality, identification with the flesh and materiality, and meaninglessness, right? Identification with the flesh and materiality and not with God. Identification with the flesh, and this leads to meaninglessness. And they call the force that works towards all these things altogether Satan. But there's actually an error of conflation there, because the first half of those qualities belong to Saturn in traditional astrology, and the second half belong to the earth, right? So suffering, deception, loss, confusion, abuse, those are Saturn stuff. Carnality, physicality, identification with the flesh, materiality, and not with God, meaninglessness, these are the earth, right? So people can see the image of terrestrial Saturn and the devil, the earth Saturn polarized to the earth, and they identify that as the devil because rightfully so, it's about as ugly as it gets. But the mistake is not realizing that demons can be in the appearance of justice and restoration and gain and all kinds of things we consider positive and pleasant. Yeah, demons are in those. That's a really vital part of the demonic process, actually, is that after being broken, you can be restored in a more worldly way. That can look like when you're bullied as a child and you become an egomaniac who farms like, and you become famous. Demons aren't just using abuse and negativity, they're also using positivity and gain and pleasant things. So there's demons in fame and demons in wealth and success and in love and in lust. There's not just demons in Saturn, there's demons in the sun and Jupiter and Venus. So in all the positive and negative that demons can be found in, let me read that again. So in all the positive and negative that demons can be found in, what is the common denominator as to what they're working towards? They're working towards progressing you deeper into the world and the flesh and outwardness and external attachment. Because when you do that, you can build a wall between yourself and God, and your spirit can rot away, and you'll only be left with the meaninglessness of the world and the flesh. And that is the downward spiral of the descending soul. I quote again, "For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust." But through it all, you're either progressing deeper into the world or deeper into God. And in progressing deeper into the world, all that karma, good and bad, becomes more carnal and physical and worldly and therefore meaningless. Because that's where you're putting your attention. You're putting your attention into the surface level, the shallow, the high density, the low vibration, the flesh. And that's where you're going to see your good and your bad, because that's where your attention is. It's the world you create. The highs are meaningless orgasm. The lows are diseases of the flesh. It's all meaningless, because the world and the earth is a meaningless counterfeit fabrication created by the devil. The soul trap people will say that it's a soul trap by malevolent beings because people are being possessed by demons. And where's the meaning in that? Exactly right. There is no meaning in that. And it's again the consequence of choosing the world. Just another meaningless disease. That's the nature of the world, is meaninglessness. As I've said in so many of my posts, Pluto brings the sun of conscious mind and the psychological shadow that is Saturn together as a result of inwardness and a movement towards singularity. And moving towards the outwardness of the world sets the sun of conscious mind on things outside so that it can never move inward to the psychological shadow. And that's how we get Saturn's correspondence with spirit possession in traditional astrology, namely Vettius Valens' 2nd century work entitled Anthology. It all begins with worldliness and choosing the earth and the flesh. Damn. I gotta scroll up a little bit. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Right. It all begins with worldliness and choosing the earth and the flesh. That's what separates the sun of conscious mind from the psychological shadow. And so the sun's disinfecting rays can't drive away the demons, and demons proliferate in the substrate of filth of a dark, unexamined psychological cave and pull the strings while hiding in that place of unconsciousness where the victim can't even see it happening because their eyes are set outward rather than inward. It's absolutely a choice. A continuous choice that people constantly make. Because descending souls aren't guided. They have freedom of choice. And the choice they make every single day is to choose the world and the flesh over inwardness to have a relationship with God. The consequences speak for themselves. And they're of course most pronounced at the tail end of the highly Saturnian Kali Yuga, which is again just one part of the cycle, and the experience of the horrors today aren't necessarily representative of how all life on Earth always is. So the characterization of Earth as an archon soul trap on those grounds is also very fallacious. But I think at this point, any adherent to the soul trap theory probably believes I've been pussyfooting around the core point as to why they believe what they believe and conveniently not addressing it. Actually, I was saving the best for last, because in correcting the following misconception, it will create what's probably the greatest breakthrough in understanding out of anything. The soul trap people say Earth is obviously not an evolutionary school, because how are you supposed to move up through the grades of that school when you have your memory wiped in every lifetime? You can't build off of any previous knowledge. This is where training in traditional astrology can really help fill in the blanks of what people can't understand and solve the problem of making wild reactionary assumptions. In Vettius Valens' Anthology, Saturn's significations include those who conceal their deceit, deceitfulness, secrets, obstacles, prisons and restraints, and feigned appearances. In Abu Mashar's 9th century work, The Great Introduction, Saturn is said to signify delusion, deception, putting on airs, confinement and the imposing of restrictions, confusion, restriction, secrets, the knowledge of secrets, and the unwillingness to share or disclose those secrets to those who don't know. So we can see a lot here of why the sun is what illuminates things and makes them visible and knowable, and Saturn is what keeps you in the dark on things, what occults things. Saturn is traditionally associated with ignorance, confusion, not being able to see the truth, not being able to see a way out of a situation, being stuck, being imprisoned, having restrictions and a stranglehold on information so that the meaning of the things of the world are kept secret from you. And nothing is what it seems, and you're fed a bunch of lies. I mean, this is all Kali Yuga stuff. Let's be very specific as to what we mean by memory across lifetimes. Direct memory of the details of what our name was, or what we looked like, or what we did for work, or who our friends were in previous lifetimes, and all kinds of personal details like that are really only a hindrance to the process of evolution in Earth as a school. And generally speaking, thankfully, that's not how memory is transmitted across lifetimes. Instead, only the contents of the mental body are transmitted across lifetimes. And this is why a lot of people get such powerful downloads from divinity. The memory is just the pure information, and the knowledge how things work seemingly out of nowhere. It's not all the personal stuff. And so our memory from previous lifetimes can be transmitted and is transmitted as the experience of gnosis and downloads. But it's still very piecemeal, isn't it? In our modern day, all this gnosis, all these downloads, very piecemeal. In fact, most people have basically no gnosis at all. And it really is as if every time they're born, there's no cross-incarnational understanding given to them. Well, that would make sense if we're born into the Kali Yuga, and the Kali Yuga is Saturnian. That means it's the age itself which leads to the restriction of gnosis and leads to being kept in the dark on why things are the way they are. And so since everything astrologically works in oppositions, we can see the opposite of the Kali Yuga in the golden age of the Satya Yuga. Its existence can be inferred with certainty, because just as there's a sign of Saturn's rejoicing, there's also a place of the sun's rejoicing in the zodiac, exactly opposite it. So, the sun in the Satya Yuga combats all these restrictions of memory and gnosis. It's really no coincidence that Lionsgate is when people get such powerful downloads. It's all solar stuff. And in the Satya Yuga, gnosis and understanding flows abundantly and freely, and all are in understanding and peace and spiritual uprightness. Yes. Well, I guess that leads to some questions. What's even the point of being exposed to a prolonged age of ignorance? What is there to gain from an evolutionary standpoint from being born into circumstances where you don't have a manual and keep forgetting why you're even here every time you're born? It's $1 million question, and I have $1 billion answer. But to get there, I first have to ask $1 trillion question. Who are you? Well, I am just pure consciousness. That's everything everywhere all at once. I'm just this, and this is it. Cute answer that every non-duality YouTuber putting on airs gives. I'll ask that question again. Who are you? They'll say, what, you don't like my answer? Okay, I'm Bob. I'm this physical body, and I work an office job and like building model trains. And I'll say, no, it's not really who you are. Somewhere in between those two extremes, there's who you are at the level of your personal essence. I mean, of course, there's who you are as a result of environmental conditioning. And if you were to be plucked off this planet and put on another one with some aliens, you'd be a totally different person because of that environmental conditioning. But at the same time, there's a part of you that wouldn't change regardless of what environment you were placed in. But it is also distinct to you and not the same essence as other people around you. And so here's the rub. That part of you that's shaped by environment is fragile. It's not a concrete part of who you are. And you don't know who you really are at the level of your core personal being until someone like Saturn comes along and takes everything away from you and shakes you down and strips you down to where you have nothing, not even your clothes, and then you're naked. And who you are at that point when you're naked, that you've lost everything and don't know why it had to happen, is who you are at your core. That's the part of you that can't be shaken by what's going on around you. That's your core essence. And this is very vital to understand, because a lot of people think they're spiritual because they've been exposed to a certain spiritual system, philosophy, or spiritual practice. And maybe they've learned a lot of ideas, and maybe they've been surrounded by very spiritual people in a very spiritual culture. And maybe they've done a lot of practice in becoming more spiritual. But the question is, as a result of all this, at the core essence of your being, have you been transformed? Has the essence of who you are evolved? And the end result of about 95% of the whole spiritual lifestyle thing is the answer, no. Because in the Satya Yuga, everyone is all enlightened in everything, and they all have this gnosis. But that's because that's their culture. They were taught to do all the right things. They partake of a way of being that leads to all those desirable outcomes. But that's very different from saying that how you are in the Satya Yuga is the core of who you are, and that it's unshakable and won't change. That's the purpose of the Kali Yuga. That's the purpose of the Kali Yuga. And to be born into an age where you have no access to gnosis and you're kept in the dark, when you've forgotten everything and you're in confusion and don't know why anything is happening, or there's also Saturnian correspondence is confusion, right? To be in confusion, to not have a manual, to not know why anything is happening, to have forgotten, but to also have pressure being placed on you, the true essence of who you are comes out. And it's in points like these that you realize that the essence of who you are isn't where it needs to be. You may have existed at a point in time where you were very spiritual, but it was just learned conditioning. It wasn't an essential personal core transformation. And these ages of ignorance, blindness, and forgetfulness, these Saturnian Kali Yuga ages, prove who you are at your core essence. It's the time at which you get to show and prove how much transformation you've actually made as a result of the gnosis you were given in previous ages. Well, damn. Here we are, and we didn't do so good. No. Especially the descending souls definitely didn't do very good at all. And at their core essence, they're a wretched animal. And so they're on their way to degrading into animals. Well, man, we had access to all the right information and culture and practices. What do we have to do to actually achieve that transformation at the core level of our being so that our godliness is bulletproof and remains perfect and intact, rain or shine? In forgetfulness and in edification and gnosis? Well, you're probably not going to like the answer to that. The truth is that only one thing penetrates so deep that it can get to your core and fundamentally change who you are. And it's trauma. It's another one of the false beliefs we've allowed ourselves to adopt, that trauma only makes us worse, that it poisons and degrades our being. I can see where this idea came from, since for descending souls, it's absolutely true. They become traumatized. They basically invariably all get worse as a result of it. And that's what gives us our cultural understanding of what trauma results in. But we have to remember Pluto's association with trauma. Very often in the natal horoscopes, Pluto on the ascendant or in strong significant aspects is an indication of a pattern of trauma in that person's life. And yet we also have Pluto's correspondence with evolution, regeneration, and transformation. Funny that, isn't it? Pluto cuts into the core of your being, and it has the power to transform who you are at your core. It's basically the most intense process there is. Pluto's correspondence with intensity. But it's also the most transformative. Descending souls have free will. They can step into alignment with Pluto's energy anytime they want. The funny thing is, nobody wants to. Pluto is so traumatizing and brutal that anyone valuing pleasure and comfort and avoiding pain and discomfort would naturally want to avoid this energetic current. This is why the planets we know as being associated with comfort and pleasure, being Venus and the Moon, are in detriment and fall in Scorpio. No one willingly chooses to work with this planet, because while it does have the power to restore and regenerate you, it's also what breaks you. And this is the slowest planet. So when you're broken for a very long time. But in learning to mend that brokenness, that's how you gain the ability to transform who you are at the level of your core being. It's the grand alchemy. And to stand in the flames, being burned alive, only to be turned to dust, and then reborn again, like the phoenix. And this is the planet that's engraved on the soul of a chosen one, an ascending soul. So let's put it together. Uranus is what leads to energy and the impulse of positive and negative to chase each other, to come back to a oneness, like electricity in the closing of a circuit. And the various oppositions of positive and negative that would create such electricity and movement and energy in the planets and signs of the zodiac makes the zodiacal wheel move like a motor, makes it rotate. And so Uranus is responsible for change. Uranus puts you in every possible different situation and asks, I made it different, but is it really different? Because if the core essence of who you are is in alignment with your highest archetype, your higher self, in an unshakable way, then the answer is no. The situation may be different, and I may not even know why I'm here. But who I am is who I am, and that can't be shaken or changed by my environment. And so sun brings sunny days and gives us sight of how everything works and why we're here. And Saturn brings rain and fog, and we're in the dark and don't have any answers. But rain or shine, it's no different. The only thing that matters through it all is who you are at the core of your being. And to align your core essence with the perfect nature of your highest archetype is the mission. And the personal diamond is the helper in this work. Finally, I'd like to address what's at the deepest root of the soul trap theory. And in people like Tony Sayers and Benedictine, the truth, it's pain. It's the observation of how wicked and cruel the world can be. And it asks, why does the process have to be so painful and horrifying? Why do I have to be broken? It's not fair. Life itself has to be designed by some evil devil. Well, the truth is that God is actually doubly generous. Generous. Well, the truth is that God is actually doubly generous. You may be broken in the Kali Yuga, but he gives you a Satya Yuga where you get to be in peace and bliss as well. But that's not even the end of God's generosity. You're only on Earth for about, like 80 years? And you may be broken and exposed to horrors in that time, but haven't you ever thought about how it can be that you're born pure and innocent at the beginning of every lifetime? It's because you were given plenty of time for rest and peace and joy in union with God between lifetimes. That's what happens when you die. A minor period of union with God restored you in the period between lifetimes. Everyone who has near-death experiences describes this experience of universal love that's so intense that in mass studies that have been conducted of near-death experiences, about 85% of people chose to stay in that afterlife realm because they valued that universal love significantly more than the people they loved and left behind on Earth. They just said, fuck you guys. This universal love of God is so much more beautiful and fulfilling. So I'm staying here. But of course, their time on earth wasn't done, so they were forced to go back down. That's not encouragement to take your own life, because there's metaphysical consequences for doing that. But it's recognition of the reality of the fact that all evidence points to the reality that our suffering on earth and our being broken is such an extremely temporary and minor period of the experience of the soul. God gives us so much generosity and grace, and gives us so much time in the period of bliss. God has so much patience, because really what God is absolutely obsessed with is the evolution of consciousness. You ever been obsessed with something? Like, you gotta have it now. You're obsessed with it. Right now I'm playing a lot of Pokemon. I want to get back to playing Pokemon. I'm obsessed with Pokemon. I want to play it right now. It's a ROM hack, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Oh my God, so much fun. But in God's unfathomable patience, grace, and love, it puts its own obsessive desire for evolution to the side and allows us so much rest and restoration, and even lets us taste union with God for periods of time, even though we don't deserve it and we're wretched and imperfect. These people talk about a soul trap and talk about refusing to negotiate with the karmic entities they encounter after death, as if to cross their arms and refuse to come back down here. I wonder where they think they're going to go, when inevitably God has to spit you out due to your own imperfections. And you can only incarnate in a place which matches the quality and level of your consciousness. Right? As an aside here, I would say that this soul trap idea is not brand new. I mean, this is what the Gnostics believed. And pretty much anyone can look at the world in which we live and see it as like a prison-like nature. I remember there was the interview, I think it was John C. Reilly, whoever that guy was, you see that movie, it's like a Silence of the Lambs, the Red Dragon, where I can't remember, the Dollarhide kills that one guy, sets him on fire and in a wheelchair. That actor, it was an interview with, what's his name? I'm all Alzheimer-y these days. The guy who's depressed and killed himself in Good Will Hunting. How do I forget this? Fucking hey, that's gonna drive me up a wall. Well, yeah, you know the guy. He was in Good Will Hunting, and you know what I mean. Mork and Mindy. He was talking about how it was almost like foreshadowing for what he was gonna do, and he was gonna kill himself. He's talking about like everything in life seems like a prison, and yeah, I mean it does seem like a prison. I mean it is prison-like. I mean this is the emanation of God. First it comes through Saturn. This world is prison-like. All of the traditional sources associate Saturn with prisons. It makes perfect sense. It's a restraint. It's an obstacle. It gives things structure and form. And it sets boundaries and restrictions on things. So that's what the Theurgists saw as well. And people like Iamblichus and Plotinus and everything like that. Actually, he wasn't that into theurgy. But yeah, like people that practiced the Greco-Egyptian mysteries and theurgy and everything like that. They wanted to jailbreak out of this prison. But part of the theurgic process, it isn't just the henosis, right? It's otherwise everything would all be focused on total non-stop non-duality. And I believe this is actually a spiritual mistake people make all the time. I see it in these YouTube videos. I tell you, go to YouTube, you type in non-duality, and then you're gonna have some girl in front of a camera being like, it was always here. There's no me, it's just a story. This is just it. every freaking one of those videos. Like, you haven't actually perfected yourself. So congratulations on, massaging the boundaries of the structure in which you identify yourself and the world. Congratulations on dissolving yourself into a greater whole. You're about to realize the simple fact that the true monad, the unity, is a singularity that is a quality of perfection, and that the further you move away from that singularity, the more imperfect things become. So you're going to discover that although you may have a minor experience of enlightenment, like a sense of unity, it cannot persist, because only perfect things can remain joined with God as a non-dual unity. Right? So the theurgic process is just as concerned with self-perfection, perfecting yourself. So I say all the time, theosis has to come before henosis. The focus shouldn't just all be on dissolve separations, you know. And certainly these like direct track non-duality people of like, let me just change how I think so I can see things all non-dualistically. It's not supposed to happen like that fucking at all. And the consequences will speak for themselves. These people are not going to be able to persist in any sort of spiritual progress that way. It's going to be very short-lived. It's going to be as fleeting as the taste of bubble gum. Because really that non-duality is supposed to be a consequence of the meditative practices and everything like that. It's not supposed to be something you kind of brute force your way into thinking. And additionally, I would argue that those meditative practices are supposed to be in conjunction with the act of self-perfection, right? To come more into alignment with God's perfect nature. And in that way, you can embody your highest archetype and you have stability of self-expression, right? In Jungian psychology terms, it's the self-archetype. And when you have that, then the true self shines through and the ego is no longer necessary. And at that point, it's much easier and it's much more enduring the results of being joined in union with God. So that's just something I'd like to add. So yeah, I mean, this video was inspired by like certain questions of like why the world seems so unjust. You know, there's an excerpt from the book of Habakkuk in the Bible, chapter 1, verse 4. And this book is about the experience of injustice, about how Judah was undergoing all of this persecution and all of this unrighteousness. And Habakkuk was asking God, what is going to be done about this? And God says, don't worry about it. I'm going to punish Judah even more by using Babylon, who are even more fucking unjust and terrible and evil. And that's gonna who I'm gonna use to punish Judah for you. And he's like, Habakkuk is like, what the fuck, man? Like, you're using people that are even more wretched and evil to punish us. Like, that's pretty messed up. Yeah, I mean, this kind of tails back into the whole core of everything I've just said here, is that you're going to have periods of injustice. This is a really interesting thing that people get wrong about astrology. They associate Saturn with justice, and they associate it with karma. And actually, it's not really true from a traditional standpoint. Actually, it's the exact opposite. Saturn is associated with injustice, and Jupiter is associated with justice. Saturn can seem like justice in the sense that it is the negative qualities of your past coming back to you, and so you're going to experience an ugly situation, right? If you think about it, it's like, how does somebody who does something wrong experience karma, right? If karma is meant to help you understand a situation holistically by being put in every part of that situation, the way that a person who does an injustice would experience karma is by themselves experiencing injustice, right? So the negative karma will come back around, and that person will be subject to an unjust, vile situation, except this time they're on the receiving end of it. So in a greater sense, that seems like justice, because they've come to experience the same situation that they have put onto somebody else. But really, they are the victim of another injustice. It's justice via injustice. So Saturn, you should not look at it as Saturn's coming around, so now justice is going to happen. It's the exact opposite. Saturn coming around means, like, let's say in like a court case. The Diddy case is like the perfect example. I didn't actually look at the chart of when this is happening, but Saturn coming around would indicate that he would get away with it, basically. And Jupiter coming around would indicate that there would be justice upheld. This is actually the traditional view. So yeah, that's a little point I'd like to make. And I guess the greater point I'm making is there are going to be Saturnian ages. I mean, if we agree everything we said here, we can agree that this age looks like a Saturnian age. It's the Kali Yuga. I mean, even the ancient Greeks talked about an age of a fallen Saturn. This is what it looks like. And really what qualifies this age is that it's profoundly unjust and profoundly wicked. And it seems like evil people are getting the better of the righteous people. I mean, righteous people are being just like attacked for no reason, and they just roll around like pigs in mud, these evil people. I think this is exactly the experience that Habakkuk was happening in the book of Habakkuk. And looking up to God saying, why is this happening? And we gotta go back to Uranus, right? Uranus said, if it's different, is it really different? Why is it that we aren't putting our focus on embodying our highest good, regardless of external situations? Right? Just because the world is messed up, we stop putting our attention on God. We stop putting our attention on elevating to our highest good. The way it's supposed to be is that we are in alignment with our higher self, no matter what. It's the core essence of who we are, the core essence of our being. So we may not even remember anything of why we're here. That doesn't matter. If we had done the work properly in the previous ages, this age would not reveal our shortcomings. And even in an age of such profound ignorance such as this, the possibility for seeking is still there. And I would say that one of the really interesting details about Saturn, kind of paradoxical nature, is that it is associated with secrets, and it is associated with ignorance and having things kept from you. But when you do get those Saturnian secrets, they're actually more profound than any other part of the cycle. Right? So the Kali Yuga, in the Hindu viewpoint, the Kali Yuga was considered one of the greatest possible catalysts for spiritual evolution. And I think the reason that is you're not being spoon-fed all the answers, and you're not being supported by all the other people around you, kind of like peer pressured or culturally conditioned into doing the right thing. If you do the right thing, you have negativity and evolutionary pressure being placed on you, you don't know why. So if you do the right thing in the face of that and not knowing why you did anything, that means you are now a person who has a higher level of spiritual embodiment, and you're in a state of alignment with your higher self, no matter what, regardless. It doesn't matter if you don't know what the fuck you're doing here. It doesn't matter if you have any sort of, information as to why. You do it regardless. because it's just who you are. It gives stability, it gives constancy to the highest archetype of your being, your higher self, and it shines through as a core part of who you are. So to pass through this Saturnian age is to stabilize, and as only Saturn can, any sort of qualities of positivity that you cultivate in yourself. So I'll close the video on this. Pluto has the power to give your pain meaning, to break you and to restore you, but crucially to drive away the meaninglessness of the world and the flesh. It spiritualizes your karma. It allows you to evolve your consciousness rather than to be stuck in a cycle of meaningless mechanical evolution designed for animals to better survive to propagate further life on Earth. It allows for negativity to be encountered in a way that transforms you at the core of your being so that you can be better perfected and in alignment with the nature of God. So you can finally be rejoined with non-dual unity. So in forgetfulness and in remembrance, stand in that fire and be reborn as the phoenix and enter into your perfect nature, unshakable, come rain or shine.